Hey guys, my name is Joe and welcome to Potato Recap. In today's recap, we will check out a 2014 romance film titled 5 to 7. But before we get started, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. The movie starts as we are introduced to the main character and narrator of this movie, a man in his 20s named Brian. As you might have guessed, he only takes the subway sometimes. Brian is a young wannabe writer. His study wall is covered with rejection letters on paper from prestigious publications. But that doesn't stop him from doing what he does. The fiction editor of The Atlantic said sorry in the most recent rejection, which Brian tells his mother is a sign of progress. While strolling through New York City, he notices a stunning woman, Ariel Pierpoint, smoking in front of a hotel. As he approaches Ariel, Brian lights a cigarette. The young man learns that Ariel is French from their brief conversation. After a rough start with reference to The Little Mermaid, he makes up for it with some witty French banter about how being a smoker in New York these days is like being in exile. And she mysteriously offers to meet him again between the hours of 5 and 7. Brian learns about Ariel's marriage and 2 children during their second meeting. French diplomat Valerie is her spouse. They have a 5 to 7 agreement, and the man is a few years older than Ariel. In essence, both partners are free to engage in extramarital affairs as long as they happen between 5 and 7 p.m. At first, Brian is uncertain about Ariel's open marriage to Valerie and is hesitant to pursue a relationship with her. Brian's personal beliefs forbid dating a married woman, but he can't stop thinking about Ariel. The young author goes to see her again as a result. Ariel is by herself as she pulls a Jetons, her favorite cigarette. She presses it to her lips and reaches into her purse for a lighter, but a Zippo, held by Brian, enters the frame. When she realizes who is behind her, her surprised eyes widen. She doesn't immediately turn to face him though. She inhales the flame and exhales the smoke before turning into his arms silently and suddenly. 5 o'clock that evening at the entrance to the St. Regis Hotel on 55th Street. Uneasy Brian climbs the stairs. He's returned home, shaved, changed, showered, and most likely changed again. The doorman opens the rotating doors with a friendly nod. The lobby of St. Regis is surprisingly compact and understatedly elegant. The concierge and receptionists all have unique personal styles. After passing the bar's entrance and moving through the seating area, Brian turns left at the front desk and then heads up the elevator. A few floors later, after exiting the opulent hallway, Brian follows the instructions on a covert brass plaque until he reaches room 2117. At the door, he pauses before ringing the bell. As soon as the light turns green, he walks into room 2117. A lovely corner suite with 2 exposures is available. However, under control, French provincial. Mum is being poured into 2 flutes in the living room by Ariel. On the stereo, Paolo Conte is quietly singing the song Via con me. Low light is created by drawing the curtains. The street is inaudible. As she pours, she gives him a loving smile that is all her own. They clink glasses as she hands it to him and looks him in the eye. Then, when her expression changes, Brian notices that the flirting and jokes have ended for the time being. She leads him into the bedroom while holding his hand. She turns to him after they have passed the threshold, her eyes pinning him. As we can see, this is not a whim or a caprice for her. They embrace and kiss. She rises from her bed and begins getting dressed. He nods as he senses the outside world taking control once more. She gives him a goodbye kiss while grinning. He finds himself suddenly alone as the door closes. Monday the following week at 5. With his hands in his pockets, Brian waits until Ariel turns the corner from 5th Avenue. They exchange 2 cheek kisses. After half an hour, Brian and Ariel watch a French-language movie with lots of dialogue. A character starts speaking frantically. As she listens, Ariel chuckles contentedly. Looking for subtitles on the screen, Brian squints. He smiles as they turn back to the screen, where the rapid-fire dialogue and woefully inadequate subtitles are still being shown. She laughs once more. He is so happy when he is having fun that he completely disregards whether he understands the subtitles. He merely observes as she gradually falls in love. At St. Regis Hotel at 4:59 that evening, Brian bounds up the stairs to enter with a certain spring in his step. The doorman opens the rotating door while nodding. Brian strolls by the front desk. The gorgeous receptionist also smiles knowingly but without passing judgment as he turns left to the elevator bank. Then Brian grinned to himself again. He boards the elevator. There is Benoit. Brian gently knocks while holding his card key. This time, however, the door swings open just wide enough to let Ariel's lovely hand pass through. He accepts it and enters. The entryway shuts. Respectfully, we stay put in the hallway. Ariel rides off in a taxi that night. After turning and giving his friend the doorman a hearty salute, Brian turns and strides east. Brian is unable to resist the Sabre car that is at the curb. The food and drink are quickly prepared and packaged by the vendor. Brian pays him $7, including the appropriate tip. He picks up the items and leaves, munching on the hot dog as he walks. He is in the best shape of his life, and his appearance, given the hot dog, the Coke, and his Levi's, is entirely youthful and unmistakably American. Then he sees a black Citroën limousine approach the curb slowly. The front fenders are decorated with small French flags. The back door of the limousine opens as it stops. In a hurry, Brian realizes how terrible this is. He must decide whether to stand tall when his plans are discovered, like all men, or to flee. He makes up his mind quickly. He stands up straight and turns to face the back seat with steely eyes. Valerie is a 47-year-old man who exudes great elegance. J.M. Weston shoes, a Brioni suit, an Hermès tie, Cartier watch, and a wedding band. You can tell from one glance that this man is unfazed by anything and at home in the king's courts. His flawless English and strong accent only increase his influence when he speaks. Valerie extends an open hand as a sign of welcome. When Brian pauses, he briefly considers what kind of a yutz he must appear to be in the eyes of this fantastic Frenchman with his street meat and soda pop. He then gets into the car because his gut tells him it's the right thing to do. He closes the door after him with a pull. The driver gets back into traffic slowly. Valerie is happy. Brian moves the hot dog so he can use his right hand again. Valerie shakes Brian's hand even though it might be wet from the hot dog. In Valerie's face, Brian sees the masculine equivalent of Ariel's goodness and compassion. During the drive, Valerie informs Brian that he is glad his wife met him. He says that Brian has brought a spark into her eyes that he has never seen. Valerie then invites Brian to join him for dinner at 7:30 p.m. Saturday. Brian, even though hesitant, accepts the invitation, and the car pulls up in front of Brian's own apartment building, which he now knows. This is, of course, unsettling. The car stops, and Brian gets out. Before closing the door, Valerie gives a friendly wave goodbye, which Brian returns. The limousine drives away, leaving Brian completely confused at the curb. He looks down and sees that he still has the hot dog and Coke in his hands. The following evening at 5 p.m. at the hotel, Ariel uses her keycard to open the door. She finds Brian waiting for her. He's a little nervous and is drinking a lot of champagne. She explains to him that she was the one who told her husband about him. She then reassures him that her husband is wonderful about their arrangement and should not be stressed out about the dinner party. On Saturday, Brian gets into a taxi and heads out to Ariel's home. He gets out of a cab wearing a coat, tie, and topcoat. The door is held open for him by an Irish doorman in uniform, and he walks into the vaulted lobby from before the war. A second doorman seems to have been waiting for Brian. He shows Brian how to get to the elevators. Brian gets off the elevator with a second white-gloved elevator man. This time, Brian doesn't try to talk to anyone. The elevator opens right into Ariel and Valerie's apartment. You can see at least a dozen people dressed for dinner through the archway between the living room and foyer. Under the din of lovely bilingual conversation, you can hear Patrick Bruel on the stereo. Little Mark and Elodie, dressed in clothes from Flora and Henry, stand in the foyer as the greeters. Brian also meets Jane, Valerie's mistress, and other notable individuals. Brian arranges for Ariel and his parents to meet, Sam and Arlene. Regarding Ariel, they each have different perspectives. Arlene appears to be more accepting of Sam's son dating a married woman, unlike Sam, who is unhappy about it. Brian achieves success after receiving numerous rejection letters for his work. One of his short stories has been chosen for an award by the renowned magazine The New Yorker. The magazine has also invited the young author to attend its ceremony. Since the event occurs outside of the 5 to 7 window, Brian cannot have Ariel to himself during the ceremony. As a result, Ariel arrives with Jane and her husband. Sam, in contrast, is incensed about the circumstance because he thinks it is inappropriate and awkward. Jane meets her boss at the after-party and introduces Brian to her, Galassi. The publisher is interested in signing a publishing deal with the young author because his short story caught his attention. Brian enters a high-end jewelry store to purchase a ring with the prize money he recently won to pop the question to Ariel. After initially being hesitant about his proposal, Ariel decides she wants to marry Brian. The mother of two requests that her lover pack a few things and meet her at the hotel the following day. The same evening, Brian receives a slap in the face from Valerie at his apartment. In the eyes of Ariel's husband, the proposal from Brian violates their 5 to 7 agreement. However, Valerie hands Brian a check and orders him to look after Ariel and provide for her in the way that she deserves. As agreed, Brian checks into Ariel's hotel but is shocked to discover that she has left. Ariel explained her inability to leave her husband and their children in a letter to Brian before she left. Ariel asked Brian not to get in touch with her again despite the fact that she still has feelings for him. After the breakup, Brian learns that Galassi has published his debut work. A few years later, Brian encounters Ariel and her family while taking an impromptu stroll through the Guggenheim Museum. He introduces the Pierpoints to his own family, wife and infant, and lets Valerie know that Jane has also started a new life, married and with a son. Before they part ways once more, Ariel subtly reveals to Brian that she is sporting the engagement ring he gave her many years ago. That's it for today. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe.